The heavy wooden door of the family house slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the humid evening air of Enugu. Kanyin did not look back at the young man standing by the rusty iron gate, his face a mask of crumpled humiliation. It was the third time this month a suitor had left her compound in tears. At 19, Kanyin possessed a beauty that felt less like a gift and more like an absolute weapon. Her dark skin radiated a flawless liquid glow, and her eyes held a piercing, regal weight that made men stutter before they could even utter her name. She walked into the living room, tossing her braided hair over her shoulder, completely unbothered by the trail of broken hearts she left in her wake. Before we dive deep into how this dangerous pride completely altered Kanyin's destiny, smash that subscribe button right now, drop a like on this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional African stories. Trust me, you want to stay glued until the absolute final second, because what happens to Kanyin at the end will leave you completely breathless. Mama Nneka sat on a low wooden stool in the corner of the room, her fingers methodically peeling a piece of roasted yam. Her eyes, heavy with years of wisdom and maternal anxiety, followed her daughter's arrogant stride. "You have sent another one away, Kanyin," Mama Nneka said, her voice dropping into a low, rumbling register that demanded attention. "The boy is a hard-working mechanic. He has a future." Kanyin let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the quiet room. "A mechanic, Mama? Is that what you think I am worth? Look at me. Look at my face. Look at my body. A woman with my kind of beauty does not smell of grease and engine oil. I am destined for a king, an oil mogul, a man whose name commands respect across the entire country. I will not waste my youth bending down to fit into a tiny, struggling life." Mama Nneka stood up, her traditional wrapper tied tightly around her waist. She walked over to Kanyin, grabbing her daughter's chin gently but firmly, forcing her to look away from her reflection in the glass cabinet. "A beautiful face will bring 100 men to your door, my daughter," Mama Nneka whispered, her eyes pleading. "But beauty is just a wrapper, Kanyin. It is a starting point, not the destination. If you do not look at a man's character, you will end up holding a golden key with no door to open. Time is a thief, Kanyin. It does not wait for a perfect prince." Kanyin pulled away with a dismissive smirk, confident that her mother's words were just the fearful ramblings of an older generation that didn't understand the power of a truly gorgeous woman. The escalation of her pride reached its absolute peak 3 weeks later during the annual village festival. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat, palm wine, and the rhythmic thumping of heavy traditional drums. Kanyin stood near the central canopy, surrounded by a small crowd of admirers, when Chika approached her. Chika was an ordinary, quiet young man from the neighborhood, known for his relentless work ethic, but mocked for his plain features and patched trousers. He held a small, beautifully carved wooden jewelry box in his trembling hands. "Kanyin, please," Chika said, his voice shaking but filled with an undeniable, raw sincerity. "I have loved you since we were children. I don't have much now, but I am working day and night. If you give me a chance, I promise to build an empire for you. I will cherish you like gold." The crowd went completely silent, waiting for her response. Kanyin looked at the box, then looked Chika up and down, her expression twisting into utter disgust. "An empire? With what, Chika? With your torn slippers and your empty promises?" She raised her voice so the entire gathering could hear, intentionally amplifying the humiliation.
You are a plain, broke, struggling dreamer. Look at your face, then look at mine. We do not belong in the same world. Do not ever bring your poverty near my shadow again. Get out of my sight." Chika froze, his face turning a deep, painful shade of ash. The crowd began to titter and whisper, pointing at him. He didn't drop the box. He simply closed it, gripped it tightly until his knuckles turned white, and looked Kanyin directly in the eyes. The pain in his gaze quickly hardened into a cold, terrifying determination. "You think your beauty is eternal, Kanyin," Chika said, his voice shockingly steady now, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "You think you can step on human beings because God gave you a fine face. Remember this day, because the world keeps turning, and a day will come when you will look for this plain dreamer and you will not even be allowed to sit at his feet." He turned and walked away, his shoulders squared, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence behind him. Instead of feeling remorse, Kanyin felt empowered by the rejection. Her beauty was an absolute currency, and she was ready to spend it in a bigger market. By the time she turned 24 years old, Enugu had become too small for her grand ambitions. She packed her bags and moved to the chaotic, sparkling, hyper-fast city of Lagos, determined to finally claim the billionaire lifestyle she believed she rightfully deserved. Lagos welcomed her with open arms. Her breathtaking looks instantly unlocked the heavy doors of high society. Within months, she was working a high-paying PR job she was barely qualified for, solely because corporate executives wanted her beautiful face at their elite board meetings and luxury dinner parties. She was completely swept up in the glittering mirage of the Lagos skyline. She spent her weekends on private yachts in Lekki, drinking expensive champagne paid for by wealthy older men who treated her like a magnificent trophy. She loved the thrill of it. One evening, after a VIP club event, a handsome, wealthy businessman named Segun drove her back to her apartment in a pristine, luxury sports car. The tension between them had been building all night under the flashing strobe lights. As he pulled up to the curb, Segun turned to her, his eyes dark with intense desire. "Kanyin, you are the most captivating woman in this city," he murmured, his voice a low, seductive purr. He leaned in, his hand sliding behind her neck, pulling her close. Kanyin did not pull away. Their lips met in a fierce, breathless, passionate kiss that tasted of expensive liquor and dangerous ambition. It was a heated, electric moment that sent a rush of validation through her veins. He kissed her deeply, pulling her body against his, and for a moment, Kanyin felt like she was truly on top of the world. But as the kiss ended and she looked into his eyes, she saw the truth. Segun didn't want to marry her. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a temporary ornament to show off to his friends. When she subtly brought up the idea of commitment and future plans, Segun's romantic smile instantly vanished. He laughed, a cold, detached sound. "Marriage, Kanyin? Let's not ruin a good time with serious talk. You are a beautiful girl. Enjoy the ride." Kanyin felt a sharp pang of anger and disappointment, but her rigid pride quickly took over. She pushed him away, opened the car door and stepped out into the humid Lagos night, telling herself that Segun simply wasn't high caliber enough for her impossible checklist. She would keep waiting for the perfect, flawless billionaire who would willingly give her his last name. The days melted into months, and the months quickly bled into years, but Kanyin's standards remained completely unyielding, even as the glittering mirage began to show its first cracks. By the time Kanyin celebrated her 32nd birthday, the fast-paced Lagos nightlife had begun to lose its initial luster. The invitations to the exclusive yacht parties were no longer arriving every single weekend, and the men who approached her at high-end lounges were noticeably younger, looking for a temporary adventure rather than a life partner. Yet her pride remained a towering, fortified wall.
It was during this period of creeping isolation that she decided to visit her childhood confidant, Reni. Reni had moved to Lagos a few years prior, but unlike Kanyin, she had chosen a completely different path. Reni had married a hard-working, middle-class high school teacher named Emeka, and they lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment in the mainland suburbs of Yaba. Kanyin stepped into Reni's apartment, her designer heels clicking loudly on the simple linoleum floor. She looked around, her nose wrinkling slightly at the sight of modest furniture, children's toys scattered near a small television, and the faint aroma of homemade egusi soup wafting from the kitchen. Reni rushed out, her face beaming with genuine radiant joy, throwing her arms around Kanyin. "My goodness, Kanyin, look at you, still as beautiful as a goddess. It has been so long," Reni squealed, pulling her friend into the living room. Kanyin sat down stiffly on the fabric sofa, smoothing out her expensive dress. "You look happy, Reni," Kanyin said, though her tone carried a subtle, condescending edge. "But tell me, how do you cope? This place is so small, and the traffic from the mainland must be an absolute nightmare. Don't you get tired of this ordinary life? Don't you wish Emeka could provide something much bigger, something luxurious?" Reni's bright smile faded slightly, replaced by a calm, deeply grounded expression. She sat down next to Kanyin, looking her directly in the eyes. "Kanyin, my home might be small, but it is filled with absolute peace. Emeka loves me with every fiber of his being. When I was sick last year, that man didn't sleep for 4 days. He was by my bedside, rubbing my feet, praying for me. We are building a life together, step by step. That is what matters." Kanyin let out a soft, dismissive sigh. "That's sweet, Reni, but love doesn't pay the bills in Lagos. A woman should have high standards. You settled too quickly. I am still waiting for a man who has everything aligned: wealth, status, perfection. I won't lower my bar for anyone." Reni looked at her friend with a mixture of deep pity and concern. She grabbed Kanyin's hands, leaning in close. "Perfection does not exist, Kanyin. The years are moving like lightning. You are chasing a beautiful mirage in the clouds while walking past solid ground. Don't wait until your castle is completely empty before you realize that a good man's love is the greatest wealth you can ever find." Kanyin pulled her hands back, her pride deeply wounded by the suggestion that she was making a mistake. She changed the subject, refusing to let Reni's words penetrate her stubborn armor. A year later, Kanyin met Tariq, and for the first time in her life, her rigid emotional walls began to genuinely waver. Tariq was a highly successful 38-year-old corporate director with a magnetic, deeply reassuring presence. He possessed a neatly trimmed beard, kind, expressive eyes, and an unshakable maturity that instantly captivated her. Unlike the superficial men she had dated in her 20s, Tariq treated Kanyin with deep respect and genuine reverence. Their chemistry was immediate and incredibly intense. After a romantic dinner at a secluded beachside restaurant, they walked along the shore, the waves crashing softly against the sand under a brilliant full moon. Tariq stopped, turning Kanyin to face him. The ocean breeze played with her hair, and her beauty in the moonlight took his breath away. "I have never met a woman like you, Kanyin," Tariq whispered, his voice thick with raw emotion. "You are stunning, yes, but there is a strength in you that I deeply admire." He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers gently at first, before deepening into a passionate, breathless, intoxicating kiss.
It was a kiss filled with a profound tenderness that Kanyin had never experienced before. Her heart raced, her arms wrapping tightly around his neck as she fully surrendered to the warmth of his touch. In that heated, beautiful moment, she felt a genuine sense of safety and belonging. But as they pulled apart, Tariq held her hands, his expression becoming serious and vulnerable. Kanyin, there is something I need to tell you before we go any further. I want to be completely honest with you. I am a widower, and I have an 8-year-old daughter. She is my entire world. If we are going to build a future together, you have to know that she comes first, and I need a woman who can accept my past and love my child. Kanyin froze. The warmth in her chest instantly turned to ice. The passionate romance of the evening evaporated, replaced by her rigid, uncompromising checklist. A widower? A single father? Her pride screamed at her that she was too beautiful, too elite, to become a stepmother, to accept a man who had already given his youth and his first love to another woman. I can't do this, Tariq, Kanyin said, pulling her hands away, her voice turning cold and detached. I am a woman who deserves a fresh start, a flawless fairy tale, without baggage. I won't lower my bar for anyone. Rainey looked at her friend with a mixture of deep pity and concern. She grabbed Kanyin's hands, leaning in close. I am not offering you second place, Kanyin. I am offering you a complete, mature, tested heart. But your pride is blinding you. You are looking for a perfect doll, not a real human being. I pray you don't realize too late that real love always comes with scars. He turned and walked away into the darkness of the beach, leaving Kanyin standing entirely alone by the roaring shore. She forced herself to stand tall, swallowing the bitter lump in her throat, telling herself she had made the right choice by maintaining her high standards. But for the first time, a small, terrifying whisper of loneliness echoed in the back of her mind. The true breaking point of Kanyin's life arrived with a sudden, devastating phone call on a rainy Tuesday morning. Her younger cousin's voice was hysterical on the other end of the line. Kanyin, come home immediately. It's Mama. She collapsed in the market. By the time Kanyin's flight touched down in Enugu and she rushed to the hospital, it was already too late. Mama Neka had passed away due to sudden heart complications. The shock felt like a physical blow to Kanyin's chest, knocking the breath completely out of her. She returned to her childhood home, a place that now felt suffocatingly empty and cold. The lively sounds of her youth were completely gone. As she sat alone in her mother's dimly lit bedroom, surrounded by the familiar scent of old lavender and traditional fabrics, she broke down. Her body shook with violent, uncontrollable sobs. While clearing out her mother's wooden chest, Kanyin stumbled upon an old, worn-out notebook. It was Mama Neka's prayer journal. With trembling fingers, she opened the pages. Tears blurred her vision as she read the shaky, handwritten entries from years ago. "Oh Lord, protect my beautiful daughter Kanyin. Her face is a masterpiece, but her heart is filled with stubborn pride. Remove the scales from her eyes. Send her a husband who will love her, a good man of character who will shelter her when youth fades. Do not let her beauty become her ultimate curse. Do not let her end up alone." The words cut through Kanyin like a double-edged sword. She clutched the journal to her chest, rocking back and forth on the floor, weeping bitterly. The maternal wisdom she had mocked for decades was now staring her in the face from the grave. She realized the immense weight of the time she had squandered, the genuine hearts she had casually discarded, and the absolute isolation she had built for herself in the name of high standards. Her mother had died praying for a future that Kanyin had systematically destroyed with her own hands. Years flew past like dry leaves in the Harmattan wind. Kanyin remained in Lagos, but the transition of time was now completely undeniable. She reached her late 40s.
The silver lines tracing beautifully through her natural hair were no longer hidden,
and the sharp, regal features of her youth had softened into a quiet, melancholic maturity. Her life was quiet, predictable, and profoundly solitary. The ultimate crushing climax of her journey occurred when she received an invitation to a high society corporate gala in Victoria Island. Kanyin dressed with her usual elegance, stepping into the grand, brightly lit ballroom. The room was packed with the elite of the country, politicians, billionaires, and industry titans. As she sipped her drink near the edge of the room, a massive commotion occurred at the main entrance. The crowd parted, and cameras began to flash rapidly. Kanyin looked up, and her heart instantly stopped. Walking into the ballroom, exuding an aura of immense wealth, absolute power, and quiet confidence, was Chika. The plain, broke dreamer she had brutally humiliated in the village decades ago was now a robust, broad-shouldered, wildly successful real estate tycoon. He wore a luxurious, pristine traditional agbada, and his face carried the dignified weight of a man who had conquered his destiny. But what broke Kanyin's heart into a million pieces was the woman walking closely beside him. Chika caught Kanyin's gaze across the crowded room. He didn't turn away. He walked toward her, his wife by his side. Kanyin's breath hitched in her throat as he approached. Chika stopped in front of her, his eyes calm, peaceful, and entirely devoid of any past resentment. Kanyin, good evening. It has been many years, Chika said, his voice deep and deeply resonant. This is my wife, Neoma. Honey, this is Kanyin, an old acquaintance from home. Neoma smiled warmly, shaking Kanyin's trembling hand. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you, Kanyin. My husband has spoken about how his roots fueled his drive to build this empire. Kanyin could barely breathe. The words choked in her throat. Nice to meet you, she managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Chika nodded politely, gave her a gentle, respectful bow, and walked away, his arm wrapping protectively around his wife's waist as they merged into the cheering crowd. Kanyin stood frozen, Chika's words from the festival echoing violently in her mind. A day will come when you will look for this plain dreamer and you will not even be allowed to sit at his feet. The prophecy had been fulfilled completely. An hour later, Kanyin stood at the back table of a grand wedding reception for Chika's eldest daughter, an event she had stayed for out of a masochistic need to witness the full gravity of her choices. The ballroom was alive with joy, music, and laughter. Chika took the microphone to deliver the father of the bride's speech. He looked at his daughter, then turned to his wife, his eyes tearing up. 30 years ago, I was a nobody, Chika said into the microphone, his voice echoing through the silent hall. I was mocked. I was rejected by those who judged me by my appearance. But this beautiful woman, Neoma, saw my heart. She chose a steady, hard-working partner over a finished product. We struggled together. We built this life together. And today, our children are the harvest of that real, messy, beautiful love. The entire room erupted into thunderous applause, guests standing up to cheer the beautiful family. In the dark, isolated corner of the back table, a single heavy tear tracked down Kanyin's perfectly applied makeup. She sat entirely alone in the crowd. She finally understood with a crushing, absolute clarity the tragic error of her life. The perfect man she had spent her entire youth waiting for never arrived because he never existed. Real love was never about finding a flawless prince. It was about choosing a good, sincere heart and building a kingdom together. Her pride had promised her a throne, but it had left her entirely alone in an empty castle. If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment right now sharing the biggest lesson you learned from Kanyi's journey. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more life-changing narratives, and tell us in the comment section below exactly where you are watching this video from. We love reading your feedback. Until next time, value real love, cherish character over appearance, and look after your heart.